Hey everybody, so welcome back, and today we are doing another, not an unboxing, but we're cracking open another deck case that I haven't opened up in a very long time. Now, interesting fact, years ago I had a girlfriend that was interested in learning how to play Magic, and at that time it was a big deal to have tribal decks, and tribal wars were kind of popular in the area I grew up. That's where it was like everybody was building elf decks, and I had my goblin deck, and people were building dragon themed decks, and it was a big deal, and a lot of the local card shops were doing that. They were hosting events with specific rules for tribe decks, and so we wanted to get her involved, and she was interested, and so she picked at that time what was rather a pain in the butt to get cards for. She picked dwarves. So we're going to take a look at was my then girlfriend's dwarf deck, and is now my wife's dwarf deck, since I was dating my wife that many years ago. So let's take a look at her deck. We have, it's mono red, because back then there was like, I think maybe a handful of dwarves that weren't red, and for the most part they wouldn't have fit into this theme. So we'll start off with our Dwarven Blood Boiler. He costs 3 mountains, so 3 red mana to summon. He's a 2/2, but with a very cool ability. When you can use him to tap any untapped dwarf to give a target dwarf +2/+0 until end of turn. This does mean that you can tap him himself to give that to someone else. Great offensive ability if you have an attacker that makes it through, but also a great ability to use in the defensive situation, so that way you can knock out large targets without just sacrificing creatures to sacrifice creatures. Spark Mage. Spark Mage is awesome because he's 1 mana for a 1/1, and he kind of goes unnoticed by a lot of people. They, when they, especially early game, you attack and they don't want to trade their creatures away, so they're like, oh, well, I'll just take the 1 damage, and they forget that Spark Mage's ability is if he successfully attacks the player, you then get to pick one of their creatures to do an additional 1 damage to. This isn't a dwarf, but I thought it was fitting, keeping in theme with the Dwarven deck. So we have Steel Wall, because I thought of all the wall cards I possessed that was the most Dwarven sounding one. And it's just a wall, but it costs 1 for a 0/4. Can't go wrong there. The next one is the Dwarven land card, Dwarven Hold. It comes into play tapped, and every turn that you leave it tapped, it gets an extra counter on it. When you finally decide to untap it, you can remove as many counters as you want, and each of those is a red mana. So that's always awesome. Kind of set that out there early game and let it build up. This was actually a dwarf card that I didn't even know existed until I started looking for her deck, and this was Dwarven Strike Force, and it costs 5, 4 colorless, and a mountain for a 4/3, and if you discard a card from your hand, then Dwarven Strike Force gains haste and first strike, which you can get them out fast enough is a pretty cool deal. And of course, being a red deck, we're going to have some burn spells, and I mean, how much more Dwarven does it get it than to have a Volcanic Hammer? Even the artwork screams it belongs with dwarves. So we have Volcanic Hammer, so for 2 mana, 1 colorless, 1 mountain, we are able to deal 3 damage directly to our target creature and or player. And for a dwarf deck, I mean, Volcanic Hammer just seems so fitting. And then, of course, Lava Spike. Good old 1 mana for 3 damage to a player. Bloodfire Dwarves, the answer to people who love their 1/1 tokens. You summon up a Bloodfire Dwarf for 1 mana. He's a 1/1. You can pay 1 mana and sacrifice a Bloodfire Dwarf to deal 1 damage to everything on the board that doesn't have flying. Great way to eliminate lots of little annoying tokens. A Ruby Medallion. Again, dwarves love their gems, so you want to have a good collection of stones and precious metals. So we have our Ruby Medallion, an artifact for costing 2. I got this as one of my first cards I got from Tempest, and I always loved this card. So it basically costs you 1 less colorless mana to cast red spells. So your Lava Hammer only costs 1 mana now. That is what we call a deal. Of course, we have a Syndicate, help just getting extra mana out there. Our Dwarven Strike Force again. Dwarven Berserker. So he costs 2, 1 colorless or with 1 mountain, or if you have your Ruby Medallion, he only costs 1. He's a 1/1, but when he attacks, if someone blocks him, he gets +3 in trample. So awesome guy to throw a little bit of extra juice on. In combination with the Bloodfire Dwarf's ability, very awesome. Oh, I'm sorry, not the Dwarven Blood Boiler's ability, not the Bloodfire Dwarf. Mountains. The Dwarven Grunt. Dwarven Grunt, awesome card, 1 mana for a 1/1, and he has Mountain Walk. So he's kind of the equivalency of my Goblin Mountaineer. Nothing wrong with that. I threw artifact lands into this deck simply because I thought the artwork was very fitting to the concept of dwarves creating castles in the mountains. There wasn't a lot of Dwarven cards to pick from, so we did the best we could, and many of the Dwarven cards were very vanilla, so it was hard, I remember, trying to find ones that weren't. And like we said, dwarves love their precious gems, so we have our Fire Diamond for 2 to lay out artifact and, mana rocks. And of course a Heart of Ramos. Heart of Ramos costs 3, but you can tap it for 1 and then sacrifice it for an additional 1, which is awesome. The Dwarven Recruiter. Dwarven Recruiter is awesome, especially if you've been struggling in the game to get to a Dwarven Strike Force, or you just happen to need that extra dwarf card because it allows you to search through your library for it. And it's a 2/2 for only a cost of 3. Fireball. It would not be fitting to have a red deck without at least 1 X-Burn spell, and the Fireball is exactly why the Dwarven Hold is in here, because hopefully if the game is dragged out that long, you drop this Fireball and you're like, hey, I got all these counters to use. So there's your big old Fireball. And of course, the name, don't let the name fool you. The Goblin Charbelcher is very much something that belongs in a Dwarven deck, seeing as how it looks like a giant crucible. And maybe it became a Charbelcher because the goblins took over and were messing with the Dwarven technology. I don't know, but it's just kind of how I always thought about it. So nice to have that big old cannon in the deck, and of course, shock. Who doesn't like shock? 2 damaged creature player for 1 mana. An oldie and a goodie. Dwarven Catapults. So Dwarven Catapults is kind of like our Fireball, only we don't get to pick our targets. It's just going to attack their creatures, and the X we pay has to be divided evenly among their creatures. So you want to get a creature count on the enemy side before you play this card, because you have to divide that damage evenly among them. You don't get to just pick one of them. But if you know they have a bunch of low-level creatures and you have the mana to pay for it, so again, the Dwarven Hold hopefully has a lot of counters on it, you can wipe out their side of the field and then rush them with an army of dwarves. and one more big old X damage. So this could target either creature or player, and it's Lava Spike. Or not Lava Spike, Lava Burst. And it's just to cast 1 red to cast, and then X damage, so you pay all those mana on top of it. Again, if the game's been going for a while and you have that Dwarven Hold with some counters, that's really where this will shine with this card. And so that's our Dwarven Burn deck that I designed for her. She wanted dwarves, and I wanted to build her a red deck that would have, especially since we were playing a lot of, like I said, tribal decks at the time, you needed to have good creature defense while at the same time being able to go on the offensive, and I felt that this gave her the best of we could at the time. I look forward to seeing if there's cards, particularly dwarf cards, that we can use to upgrade this, and we'll see what happens. Alright guys, until next time, be good people, have fun doing it, and remember, every day is a great day to go make some gains.